Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 439 of the Real Estate Sessions. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much for telling a friend. If you've stayed with the podcast for the 9 episodes of my Cancer Journey blog, thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the wrap up, and pardon me for using a few cliches along the way.
Imagine surviving 8 grueling months of literal poison just being pumped into your chest.
Yeah, that is an incredibly intense thing to even try to picture.
Right. I mean, you've completely surrendered your physical autonomy. You've stared down your own mortality, and you have endured this level of bone-deep exhaustion that literally steals entire days from your calendar.
It's a complete loss of control.
Exactly. So what is the very first thing you do when you finally cross that finish line?
Well, most people would probably assume it's, I don't know, a lavish trip around the world or some huge extravagant party.
You would think so. But for a man named Bill Risser, the ultimate prize wasn't any of that. It was a cup of alpine caramel and tiramisu gelato.
Which is just such a stunning contrast.
Oh, completely.
You have this absolute terror of a life-threatening illness juxtaposed right up against the hyper-specific sensory joy of just visiting a local gelato shop.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because that contrast is basically the beating heart of our mission today.
It really is.
We are taking a deep dive into a highly personal, profoundly moving set of source materials for you today. Specifically, we're looking at the final entry of a 9-part blog series written back in 2012 and 2013 by Bill Risser.
And you might actually know Bill as the creator of the Real Estate Sessions.
Yeah, but this particular series was published on a platform run by Jay called TPREG, which stands for the Phoenix Real Estate Guy. And in this space, Bill documented something much, much more intimate than industry news.
He was chronicling his 8-month battle with colon cancer.
Right. And our goal for you, listening right now, is to extract the really powerful psychological tools, the community support strategies, and some incredibly practical medical advice that Bill shares as he finally reaches the end of this ordeal.
Because the way he frames it all is just brilliant.
It is. He uses a surprisingly delightful trio of metaphors to navigate what is arguably the most terrifying experience of his life. He relies on elephants, ants, and gelato.
And to really grasp the weight of those metaphors, we first have to establish the physical and emotional landscape Bill is standing on when he writes this final post.
Yes, setting the scene.
Exactly. Because he opens the entry with a single heavily loaded word, which is finally.
Right. He announces that his therapy is entirely complete. And he lists the things that are finally over. And the language he uses here is just so vivid.
It's extremely visceral.
Yeah. He says there are no more dates with the healing orb, no more accessing his port, no more lost days.
And we should clarify for you, the healing orb is his term for the ambulatory chemotherapy pump he had to wear.
Right, dragging that thing around. And accessing the port, I mean, that means the deeply uncomfortable, highly clinical process of having a needle inserted into a catheter implanted right in his chest.
Just to deliver those intravenous drugs. And those lost days he mentions.
Oh, the fatigue.
Yeah, that profound crushing fatigue and the nausea that literally just deletes time from your life. The sheer biological toll of that regimen is staggering.
Because chemotherapy doesn't just attack the cancer, right?
Exactly, it attacks the entire system. Yet at the end of all this, Bill is remarkably pragmatic.
Yeah, he really is.
He doesn't just declare victory and, walk away into the sunset. He outlines this rigorous surveillance protocol waiting for him.
He lists it all out. Scans every 3 months for the next year, a colonoscopy scheduled for September, a strict return to his exercise routine, and a pretty traumatic dietary overhaul.
He is fully prepared for the maintenance phase of survival, but he also admits something crucial to his readers here.
Right, about how he felt at the beginning.
Yes. Standing at the starting line of this entire process 8 months prior, he felt utterly paralyzed by the scope of what lay ahead.
I think about it like looking up at a massive sheer cliff face that you absolutely have to climb to survive.
That's a great analogy.
Like if you stand at the bottom and stare at the summit thousands of feet up in the clouds, the scale of the task will literally freeze you in your tracks.
You just give up.
Exactly. But if you walk up to the wall, press your face against the stone, and decide to exclusively focus on the 3 inches of rock right in front of your nose, just finding the next handhold, the next foothold, suddenly you're climbing.
And what's fascinating here is the underlying clinical psychology of that approach.
Tell me more about that.
Well, Bill asks his readers the oldest cliche in the book. He says, "How do you eat an elephant?" The answer, of course, is one bite at a time.
Right, which usually sounds so cheesy.
Exactly. When we hear that phrase in a corporate meeting or like on a motivational poster, it feels trite. But when your brain is suddenly flooded with the existential terror of a cancer diagnosis, this isn't just a platitude.
It's survival.
Yes. It is a highly effective cognitive survival tactic known as temporal shrinking or compartmentalization.
I do want to challenge that concept just a bit, though.
Okay, go ahead.
Because when people talk about shrinking the horizon or only looking at the very next day, a skeptic might argue that this is just a sophisticated form of denial. I mean, isn't he just sticking his head in the sand to avoid the terrifying reality of an 8-month chemo regimen?
It's a really valid distinction to make, but no, it is fundamentally different from denial.
How so?
Well, denial is refusing to acknowledge that the cliff exists at all. Compartmentalization, in a clinical sense, is acknowledging the massive, terrifying cliff, but actively restricting your visual field so your nervous system doesn't overload.
Ah, I see.
Because when a human faces a long-term existential threat, trying to process all the pain, the nausea, and the fear of an 8-month timeline all at once,
It's too much.
it completely maxes out our cognitive load. It leads to despair. By choosing to only focus on the next appointment or just the next meal, Bill reframed a terrifying lack of control over his disease into a positive, manageable constraint.
Right, like he couldn't control the tumors, but he could control his attitude for the next 24 hours. But mental discipline only gets you so far. Like you can shrink your temporal horizon all you want, but eventually the physical reality of chemotherapy is going to make your arms give out on that cliff face.
Biology always wins out eventually.
Yeah, the one bite at a time method hits a hard biological wall unless there is some sort of external force absorbing some of the impact. And Bill recognized this immediately.
Which perfectly shifts our focus from his internal psychology to his external reality.
Right. He needed a massive amount of help. You can't eat an elephant alone.
No, you really can't. The individual mind can only generate so much resilience in a vacuum. A chronic, severe illness demands a social infrastructure.
And Bill refers to this infrastructure as his army of ants. He specifically calls out the ones that think they can move that rubber tree plant, which is a wonderful little nod to that old Frank Sinatra song about high hopes.
It's a great reference, and this army was vast.
Oh, huge. It included his family, who took care of him, sat with him, and, as he quite vulnerably admits, put up with him in his down moments.
Which is a lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah, but it also extended outward to friends, industry colleagues from Phoenix, and people across the entire country reading his updates.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we are looking at the sociology of caregiving and how a community functions as a distributed emotional scaffold.
Okay, break that down for me.
Notice how Bill meticulously catalogs the micro-actions that sustained him. He doesn't just offer a blanket, "Hey, thanks for your support." He lists the specific inputs.
Right, he mentions comments on the blog, phone calls, people dropping by, thoughts, prayers, kind words, hugs, and random surprises showing up in his mailbox. I really want to pause on those micro-actions, specifically things like thoughts and prayers or a quick drop-by. Because in our current cultural climate, we tend to view those phrases with deep cynicism.
Oh, absolutely.
We write them off as performative empathy, like hollow gestures people offer so they can feel helpful without actually doing any of the hard work.
We do. But Bill explicitly writes that these exact tiny gestures were absolutely critical in keeping his attitude moving in a positive direction.
Exactly. To a man actually fighting for his life, it wasn't just digital noise. It was actual combustible fuel.
And that cynicism you mentioned usually stems from a misunderstanding of how a support network actually needs to be structured during a long-term crisis.
What do you mean?
There's a distinct division of labor required. The immediate family bears the crushing heavy lifting. They are in the trenches dealing with the physical realities of the illness, the vomiting, the night sweats, the genuine despair.
The really dark stuff.
Exactly. But a family unit will rapidly burn out if they're expected to be the sole providers of light and optimism. They simply don't have the energy reserves.
So it operates almost like a biological system. The family acts as the vital organs handling the immediate trauma, while the wider network acts as the circulatory system, just constantly pumping in fresh momentum.
That is a perfect way to look at it. That ambient energy from the wider network is vital. A card in the mail or a brief encouraging comment online requires very little caloric effort from the sender.
Right, it takes 2 seconds.
But when you aggregate hundreds of those low-effort micro-uplifts from an army of ants, it provides a massive, sustained psychological buoyancy for the patient.
The family carries the weight, but the community provides the forward velocity.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've spent this time exploring how Bill survived the grueling realities of the treatment through his mental framing and his community. But taking a step back, how did he even get to the starting line of this fight?
That's a great point.
Because this takes us to a moment before the 8-month journey even began, and it involves a crucial, literal, life-saving interaction.
The origin point of his survival actually stems from a completely routine medical encounter.
Yes. And he takes a very deliberate moment in this victory post to shine a spotlight on Dr. DeBrusen, his family practice physician.
Right.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The doctor didn't just hand Bill a pamphlet and send him on his way. He made this pivotal, incredibly pragmatic, almost comical bargain with him.
A literal negotiation.
Yes. He looked at Bill and essentially said, "Get your colonoscopy and I will skip the prostate exam."
It is the ultimate medical horse trade.
It really is.
The doctor recognizes human nature, he understands the patient's hesitation, and he uses a bit of humorous leverage to achieve the necessary clinical outcome.
Just a completely ordinary negotiation between a doctor and a reluctant patient. But Bill actually listened.
He took the deal.
He took the deal. He got scoped 3 weeks later, and he writes with absolute clarity that this specific procedure quite possibly saved his life. He caught the cancer before it was completely insurmountable.
And the medical reality of colon cancer makes this interaction incredibly profound.
Because it's so sneaky.
Right, extremely. Colon cancer often develops very slowly from precancerous polyps. For a long time, it is entirely silent. It doesn't present with symptoms until it has advanced significantly.
Wow.
So the colonoscopy isn't just diagnostic, it is actively preventative because those polyps can be removed during the procedure before they ever become malignant.
The doctor provided the behavioral nudge, but Bill had to overcome his own dread and actually schedule the appointment.
Exactly. And Bill doesn't just tell this story as a fun anecdote. He transforms his own survival into a megaphone.
He really does. He uses this final post to practically beg his readers to listen. He tells them, do yourself and your loved ones a favor. If you are 50 or older, get scoped.
Or even earlier if you have a family history.
Right. If you have a family history of colon cancer, get your colonoscopy earlier. Talk to your doctor to map out your timeline. And he goes out of his way to reassure the audience that the procedure is not nearly as bad as it sounds.
Which is so important. He shifts his identity entirely in that paragraph.
How so?
He steps out of the role of the recovering patient just reflecting on his trauma and steps fully into the role of a passionate public health advocate.
Oh, that's a great observation.
He recognizes that his audience has been invested in his survival for 8 months, and he leverages that emotional investment to demand that you, the listener, take agency over your own health. He is actively paying the gift of his survival forward.
Which transitions us beautifully from the clinical realities of medical screening to the deeply personal, almost poetic reward that anchored Bill's daily motivation.
The gelato.
The gelato. We finally get to unpack the title of his post, The Gelato Finish Line.
The third metaphor, and from a psychological standpoint, perhaps the most revealing one in the entire text.
Definitely. Now, to understand the gelato, we have to understand the specific collateral damage of Bill's treatment.
Right, the side effects.
Yeah. He explains that one of the brutal side effects of his chemotherapy was neuropathy. Because of this, it became physically impossible for him to eat or drink anything cold.
Which is awful.
It meant he had to completely give up his beloved frost gelato.
Yeah, neuropathy is a frequent and devastating consequence of certain neurotoxic chemotherapy agents.
What's actually happening in the body when that occurs?
Well, the drugs essentially damage the peripheral nerves. They often strip away the protective myelin sheath or disrupt the signaling pathways.
Yeah.
And this manifests as numbness, tingling, or in Bill's case, an extreme, painful hypersensitivity to cold temperatures. It literally turns a glass of ice water into feeling like a mouthful of broken glass.
That sounds miserable. And because of that severe nerve damage, his ultimate goal, his guiding star through all the nausea and the lost days, became getting back to frost gelato for his highly specific order.
The alpine caramel and tiramisu combo.
Yes. He writes about how every single chemo treatment simply put him 1 week closer to that exact sensory experience.
It's such a pure motivation.
And the climax of this entire harrowing saga
Mm,
isn't, ringing a bell in a cancer ward. It is Bill walking through the doors of the gelato shop with Cindy, Kev, and Leah.
I love this scene.
He says he felt exactly like Norm walking into the bar on the sitcom Cheers.
Norm.
Exactly. He gets hugs from the owners, they eagerly ask how he has been, and most importantly, he savors his first gelato in nearly 6 months.
The imagery is incredibly cinematic. You can instantly visualize the bright lights of the shop and the warmth of the people there contrasting with the sterile, cold hospital rooms he'd been living in.
So what does this all mean? When you face down your own mortality and survive, societal expectations tell us your goals should be incredibly profound.
Right. You should have some grand epiphany.
You should want to climb Mount Everest, or write a novel, or hold a grandchild. Why does something as seemingly trivial as a cup of alpine caramel tiramisu gelato become the ultimate finish line?
This raises an important question about how human beings actually process trauma, recovery, and the loss of self.
Okay, unpack that.
When you are thrust into the modern medical system with a severe illness, you are systematically, necessarily stripped of your autonomy.
You're just a number on a chart.
You cease being a person making choices, and you become a patient following protocols. Your physical body is transformed into a battleground. Your daily schedule is entirely dictated by oncologists and lab technicians.
You can't even choose what you eat.
Exactly. Your diet is heavily restricted by your nausea and the neuropathy. Your energy to engage with your own hobbies just vanishes.
The disease completely overbeats your personality.
The clinical environment entirely consumes you. So in that context, the gelato isn't just a dessert.
What is it then?
It is a profound symbol of identity reclamation. It represents a tangible return to normalcy. Bill wasn't fighting for some abstract philosophical concept of wellness.
Right.
He was fighting to reclaim the identity he held before he became a cancer patient. He was fighting to be Bill Risser, the guy who loves the alpine caramel and tiramisu combo at his local shop where everybody knows his name.
Those massive abstract goals like getting healthy are just too vast and vaporous when you are actively suffering.
Yeah.
You can't hold health in your hand.
No, you can't.
But the freezing, cold, sweet taste of tiramisu gelato, that is fiercely tangible.
Yes.
It completely counteracts the clinical numbness of the hospital. It replaces the smell of antiseptic and the persistent beeping of monitors with a vibrant sensory anchor to the world of the living.
It is the ultimate assertion of life over sheer survival.
Holding on to that highly specific minor joy is what kept his engine running.
It really did.
So bringing this entire journey together for you listening today, Bill Risser didn't just document his pain. He handed us a highly effective, field-tested blueprint for navigating the worst life can throw at you.
He absolutely did.
If you are standing at the bottom of an insurmountable cliff, you have to shrink your focus and attack the elephant one bite at a time. You have to actively build and rely on your army of ants, letting them carry the momentum when your arms give out.
And don't push them away.
Right. You need to fiercely protect your gelato, that tangible piece of normal joy waiting for you. And above all else, please, do not let fear stop you from getting your medical checkups.
It is a profound masterclass in resilience, delivered without an ounce of self-pity.
It really is. And you see the true measure of the man in his profound generosity at the very close of his post.
That ending is so touching.
He takes the time to thank his readers for accompanying him on this dark journey. He thanks Jay for providing the platform on TPR-Egg, but then he adds a quiet final note. He says, "By the way, I'd be honored to help."
Wow.
Having just survived the war of his life, he immediately offers himself up to be an ant in someone else's army.
That's incredible.
So as you step away from this deep dive today, I want you to consider your own landscape. What is the elephant you're currently staring down? And more importantly, who makes up your army of ants? Are you actually letting them help you carry the load?
And, there's one final layer to Bill's story that I think is essential to sit with.
What's that?
Bill found his gelato finish line entirely because the chemotherapy-induced neuropathy temporarily stripped away his ability to experience it.
Right, he couldn't have it, so he wanted it more.
Exactly. It was the sudden, painful deprivation of a mundane routine that crystallized its immense value. It forces you to look at the texture of your own daily routine and wonder what incredibly ordinary, everyday joy in your life right now would become your ultimate driving finish line reward if it were suddenly taken away.